Welcome to Chaos2Cured podcast. You're here with Jeffrey Fried and Kirk Patrick Miller. We are kind of closing up our neuro series, and we're finishing with a really important topic, which is depression and suicide. Um, both of these words are much deeper than really the word means. We're losing way too many young ones to suicide, and depression has become an epidemic, just like we spoke about regarding anxiety. So, when you deal with depression, um, it's a very personal journey, and we'll get into a little bit of it and everything from some of the signs and characteristics of some of the things we've seen. Please, reach out to somebody if you do feel you are feeling down or depressed or sad. There's nothing wrong with asking for help. And there is a national suicide hotline, which is 1-800-273-TALK, which I believe is 8255. So 1-800-273-8255. And you can reach out and again, search for it. I think they have specific suicide hotlines in different states and different countries and stuff. So please reach out. As we jump into this subject, Jeffrey, I know we both have some pretty strong feelings about this and its importance with mental health. What do you see as I mean, we kind of entered this conversation saying how much it's grown. Give people maybe an idea of how serious this issue really is.
Yeah, well, depression, the definition of depression is anger turned inwards. And there's a lot of angry people out there and a lot of frustrated people out there. They have every right to be angry and frustrated, but a lot of folks don't feel that they can express verbally or anyone's really cares. So they stuff stuff. That's a redundancy. They don't deal with the feelings of depression. They just stuff it. And if you stuff stuff, what happens is you're giving it much more power. That's one thing I absolutely know. I have a background as a psychologist. I'm not practicing that. Well, I guess I do when I do my work. So yeah, I kind of am. But if you repress your, deep feelings and don't express them, they get buried. They come out. And a lot of times they come out as anger, and a lot of times they come out as depression. And there's so much to be angry about. It's a society and a culture which is killing poor people or middle class people, while rich people do whatever the hell they want and pay no taxes and get tax breaks. The I guess the Horatio Alger myth is exactly what I just said, a myth. People don't feel they've got a chance to. The American dream is dead. You can work your brains out and do all kinds of good things, and you don't get hired or you don't get raises. The inflation is way high. People can't buy houses. There's a lot to be angry about, and there's very few people listening. There was a day when we had, if you had a real severe problem, you would go to your friends and talk about it, and in person work it out. You have a vehicle to get your anger out. And today, most communication is via text or email. It's not the same, and it's a society that is cruel most of the time. People don't have they don't have that connection like they used to, and it's really even more so with the folks that I work with. Again, I work with people mostly on the spectrum, and people on the spectrum feel more than other people do. It's like Temple Grandin says, if people with autism have the same senses that everyone else does, just more of them. So when a person on the spectrum gets depressed, they get really depressed. When a person on the spectrum gets angry, they get really, really angry. And they explode or they stuff it and it comes out with explosiveness. And as a culture, it's not just autistic people, this is a culture. We tend to be more repressed. We tend to feel more. We tend to have an angry culture. We don't think it's fair. The government is horrible. The economy is horrible. And in past generations, yeah, people would get angry, but this new generation gets really angry. And when they get angry, some will get violent, but most will get depressed. And suicide is, it's not a taboo anymore. When I was growing up, it was very rare to hear somebody killed themselves. And if they did, it was almost always because they had a deadly disease or they were broke, they had no hope. But it was rare. I mean, I don't know the exact statistics, but I know it's like 20 times higher than it used to be. And I also know that it's the second leading cause of death for people under 30, of course, led by homicide. So you got homicide and suicide, and very little help.
That should not be the number one and two,
No.
cause of death. One of the things that you said that I really like is, and you intertwined depression and anger. And I really do not think many people understand that often people that are very, very angry are actually depressed,
Yeah.
because a lot of individuals, I think there's just a stigma. I don't want to say particular individuals, or there's a lot of weight put on depression being, inability, maybe sad. You think of Winnie the Pooh, Eeyore, that kind of attitude, the poor me attitude, just, not able to
Permeates.
really respond, quiet. Yes. And that is not always the case. Sometimes you get rage, as you had very eloquently stated before. It's, it's something a lot of people miss, because sometimes when I was depressed, the sadness, the only way I could really fight back the sadness was with rage. It was the only thing keeping me going. So anger at the world kind of at least helped me move on to the next day, right? So they are far more intertwined. The depression that we are seeing, for me, I have worked with little ones now for over 20 years. I have never in my life seen a higher percentage of students dealing with anxiety.
Mhm.
And then the second part would be what we're talking about now, depression. It is, I want to say probably half will deal with depression or more. I mean, it's too, and this is when we're talking about depression, I think it's very important to mention this is not just a sadness. People go through sad times. When you get
Also,
depressed, yeah, it's a chemical reaction and your brain is not functioning in the same ways. Hence the need for, you know, medication. So I think there are some characteristics of being really depressed and down in the dumps. For I know my family found it very useful. My clean shaven look, right? When the more that faded, the more I was down. So they
uh,
really paid attention very closely to how I smelled. Not They weren't like going around to make me feel uncomfortable. It's just when I wasn't taking care of myself, it became more and more and more apparent. So a lot of times, if someone is looking at their child and they notice all of a sudden the things they used to always take care of, like combing their hair, or maybe like, keeping certain things in their room clean, or toys, if those things are suddenly like flung about, maybe just haphazardly in a random place, and there's something that really matters to the individual, that only happened when I was really severely depressed. So if there's something I truly cared about and always took super good care of, when that was not being cared for, I was a disaster on the inside. And it's really important for people to kind of pick up on some of those cues, like not wanting to brush your teeth. Not, and one thing that was really awkward, and I don't think many people I think a lot of people might actually more will realize with this example than I realize. But when I was watching something that would bring me pleasure, when I was depressed, I would purposely switch the channel.
mm,
So if it was a pleasurable activity, I would push it away. And the weirdest part is, like, there was a little piece in my head that said, "Oh, you know what? This will make you feel better." And I would literally silence that. I
well,
don't
yeah, I think I know why. Because you don't
love to
want to
know.
get up. You don't want to get up because you know what's coming and it's just further to fall. So you don't want
Yes.
to even raise the bar at all.
Lack of hope. You were
Yeah.
talking about like a society, there's if you look, if as a child now, you have tests, you have to get into the top, you have to get the top degree. And then on top of all of that stuff, you either have to do so well to get a scholarship or you're going to have debt forever.
Yeah.
So we enter the workforce in debt and stressed.
Yeah.
And I think that's part of what is happening. We are seeing more depression. Just do you think, I know we did a show on nutrition, so I think it's important to talk about the fact that good health and good healthy habits can help. I think it's really important for, before we do that, are there some other things you want to talk about, whether they're characteristics or things to help people before we talk about maybe some solutions?
Yeah, I want to say one thing. I have noticed that there's less compassionate society. It's a meaner society. It's very competitive, and you have to cheat to get ahead. There's not much gentleness. It's brutal. The government doesn't really help. Um, so you get people that are angry, and then they have the internet, and they can communicate with other people who are angry, and which increases their anger and their depression. And suicide it's an option. So many kids know people that do it, and it's a way out. You don't have to deal with it. Plus, it's an angry act. You're punishing your friends, your relatives, your parents, and that's part of anger too. Like I said, I'm going to repeat it one more time. Suicide was really rare when I was growing up. I don't know, maybe one in the town that I lived in for 3 or 4 years. Now, at Evergreen High School, the area that I live in, there's 4 or 5 suicides a year in the junior or senior class. It's really a
Wow.
pandemic.
Yeah. And I mean, that's one of the reasons why we're doing this issue. And it's a very touchy subject for me. And the fact that it's even an option is very terrifying. So, parents and loved ones, when you hear someone talk about their life having no value or them being worthless, pay attention. Sometimes I feel like let's talk about some of the ways to help people through it. Um, I think one of the first things to not do, and I want to emphasize this, is don't shout at them and tell them to just get over it.
Really?
Don't tell them, yeah, it just does not work. You can't say, listen, just stop being depressed. Go get to work. Do some manual labor. It's not like that. So being gentle, and if you do notice it, at least for me, when someone was willing to listen or just sit there and be with me,
Mhm.
if you really have somebody that's on that edge and you're concerned about if they're going to possibly take action, of course you want to speak to a professional, call a helpline. You want to make sure, of course, you keep that act from happening. But in the immediate moment, giving them a reason for the next day, you can talk about what you're going to do the next day, the next week. Those kind of things can actually help a little bit. It just brings a little bit of hope. But for me, the presence, the physical presence of someone being there, if they tried to help me or tried to give advice, I would push them away. But a lot of times, just if they would sit down, not necessarily too close, you can judge and read the room, but just being there, that was very helpful. And another thing that I have suggested in the past that I really believe in is when you're in a good place, have a notebook that you write down all of the things you've done that are awesome. And when you ever get depressed or down, it's really important to look back, open it
Right.
up. You can see your own handwriting. It was
Right. Very
your
good.
words. It's
Yeah.
real. It's not fake. And so much of the time when I was depressed, if I couldn't hear good things because it was fake to me. But if
Yeah.
it was in my handwriting, I couldn't really ignore it. It wasn't like I lied to myself. I wasn't trying to trick myself. So that is very helpful. And you just want to keep them moving and going and feeling loved. Yes, they might be slow. If you try to force things, it was never useful for me. And I think my parents tried everything. So it's not an easy thing to deal with. And it's very hard to watch a family member suffer with depression. And especially when they get to that point where you're worried about suicide, when they're that down, it is painful to watch. It's of course painful to be in it. So, you know, loving and being kind and being gentle and supportive, those are probably the most powerful tools that somebody has if you're a loved one or a family member. Jeffrey, what are some things that you'd suggest?
Talking to somebody one on one who is not going, who's going to take you seriously. You got to be in the room with them. Absolutely, go to a therapist. Even if you think you can't afford it, you can access decent mental health for very little money. But do not think it's hopeless. Also, talk to them about people that you know or that they know who are suicidal, and now their lives are wonderful. They're happy, they're married, they have two wonderful kids, they have a job that they like. And you say, if you kill yourself, you will never, ever be able to participate in that. I would say nobody under 30, this is what I do say, nobody under 30 has a reason to kill themselves. I mean, if you're 75 years old and you've got cancer and you're broke, that's a whole different ball game. But they're not the ones that kill themselves. The ones that kill themselves are the young ones because they've given up hope, and it's a cruel society. You got the dark web, excuse me. You got the dark web. You've got genuinely cruel people, and there are more of them now than there's probably ever been. Stay away from that. Just boycott evil people or people that don't give a damn, and hang out with people that care and talk about it. Don't repress it. And I think most of that can be turned around in most cases. Some people are born with a depressive personality. There's always going to be a struggle. And in the past, they wouldn't kill themselves because it was a taboo. It's not a taboo anymore. That's so important. Got to make it a taboo again, or we're
I
just going
agree.
to. I mean, it's an option, and it shouldn't be, especially
It
for young
should
people.
be. Well, and the fact that people look at it as an option is terrifying because that shows how little hope they do have.
Yeah.
There are so many wonderful things that I would not have been able to accomplish or experience had I I don't know what the right term is. Being successful is a horrible term, right? I'm glad I failed at that. But whenever somebody tries to take their life, it's such a massive, uh, I think, hole that they have in their heart, in their mind. And speaking to someone just that you just said is a spectacular idea. Find some reasons that you are special and that you, I think, reframing life, working at, finding the things that you're good at and what are valuable. Um, I You need a purpose. Everybody does. And when that fades, you need family, you need friends, to kind of get us back on track. I think every once in a while, almost everybody feels really deep in despair. The key
Mm.
part is not to have it get to that point where it runs away and then there's no hope left. Because the suicide is absolutely not a great option, not a good option, not even, it shouldn't even be an option because it takes away all future potential. So, just from an objective and a logical standpoint, the opportunity cost, a great economic term, is too great.
Yeah.
When you lose that life, that person could end up solving or curing a major disease. You never know what somebody's going to be able to do. And that includes the individual when they're in that state. Because when you are deep down and you're really depressed, you don't think anything is possible. You don't think that you're going to make any money. You don't think it's possible for you to ever that next step, because when you're in that state, that's what the reality feels like.
Yep.
And so that's when you need friends, family, loved ones to say, listen, we understand. We'll be patient and we're going to help nudge you along. You don't need to force them on an instantaneous path. They don't need to be right at work the next day. They need time. And as you said, guidance. Speak to someone, reach out to a professional, go to a school counselor, my goodness, if you have access, go speak with your parents, a friend. Just let out and don't repress. Jeffrey, what you said was just right on the money. And as somebody who has felt these things and been really deep and down, they're looking for reasons to be around. I was constantly looking for a reason. Why should I exist? And so give them that. If someone is really down in the dumps and you keep yelling at them and telling them how they're failing and they're missing out on all these opportunities and they should be getting out of bed, and well, you're literally making their case.
Mm-hmm.
So you need to be very cautious with your words in those states, and you really need to take it seriously. If they need help for medication, we did a podcast on medications. There are options. And I definitely want to leave it with, one of the most important things is get to bed at the same time each night, all 7 days a week. Don't change. Doesn't matter if it's a weekend. Good nutrition. Make sure you're getting, folic acid, B12, B6, vitamin D, magnesium. You need all of the essential vitamins and supplements just to help you. And then work out, exercise. Those are really the three, or the trinity of what I see is like good mental health. It helps you. You may still need medication, and there's no harm. I'm getting tripped up on my tongue because this is a passionate subject for me, but there's no shame in taking a medication, but help yourself. So take some action, and you don't have to do it right away. If you're feeling depressed and you're hearing this, you don't have to wake up the next day and run a mile. Getting up and taking a small walk to the end of your driveway and back is a huge win. Take small steps and remember to celebrate each step. That's where I would leave it. Jeffrey, do you want to add anything?
Nope. I think it was well presented.
Okay. So please, if you're out there, you're feeling sad, despondent, reach out. Speak out how you're feeling. Don't feel shame about being sad. There's nothing wrong with feeling the way you do. You need to find somebody who says the same thing and, is there for you. Jeffrey, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. And for everyone out there listening, we appreciate you all as well. We'll be back. Thank you so much for listening to Chaos2Cured podcast. If you enjoyed the show, please share it with everyone you know, and definitely like, follow, and subscribe. Certainly leave a comment if you'd like. Let us know what you'd like us to talk about the next time. Also, in our show notes, there should be direct links where you can follow us on our social media, as well as reach out to us directly. Thanks again, and have a great day. The views, thoughts, and opinions expressed on Chaos2Cured podcast are the speaker's own. All discussion is based on our own experiences. We do not and cannot guarantee the accuracy or completeness of any information. Chaos2Cured podcast cannot give medical or health advice. All discussion is based upon our personal experiences and meant for general and educational purposes. This podcast is not a substitute for professional help or for diagnostic purposes for yourself or another. Chaos2Cured podcast always encourages you to consult an appropriate professional.